travel with grace, baby. I can't afford to cover the course. Of course, maybe settle that one in court. Cause judging by the basics, y'all already comfortable, stuck up in the matrix. Shit is basic, patch credentials, but understand your favorite rapper, peep my gold potential. I'm out of shame, been past it, trying to fit the circle cause I don't know how to act shit. Half of y'all was steady insecure, don't try to backflip, just because the seasoning and flow's already active. Only 4 years, fantastic, young veteran, new classic.
Welcome back to the Hip Hop African Podcast. We did a special series of episodes recorded live with African Studies students from Howard University and George Washington University. We partnered with Words, Beats, and Life, who live streamed the interviews from their Facebook page and helped moderate many of the interviews. This episode is with Botswana and Australia-based Zambian hip-hop artist Sampa the Great, and it is moderated by Dennis Winston, editor-in-chief at the Words, Beats, and Life journal. Lastly, take a second to follow the podcast on Twitter at HHAP and Words, Beats, and Life on Twitter at Words, Beats, Life. Also, subscribe to the Hip Hop African Podcast on YouTube.
I might find a form in my melanin. Great state I'm in all states I'm in. I might find a form in my melanin. Great state I'm in all states I'm in. I might find.
All right, welcome to another installment of the African Hip Hop Podcast. It is my pleasure tonight to introduce Sampa the Great. Sampa the Great is originally from Zambia and lives between Botswana and Australia. She started recording music while studying in the US in the early 2010s and released her first mixtape in 2015 while living in Australia. Several singles, EPs, and mixtapes later, she released her debut solo album, The Return, in 2019. The album peaked at number 12 on the Australian music charts. She went on to win Best Hip Hop Release at the 2019 and 2020 ARIA Music Awards, Australia's top music award. In 2020, she also won the ARIA Award for Best Female Artist and Best Independent Release. She has been outspoken about racism in Australia through her music and performances, and she has also been outspoken about the role of women in hip hop and the importance of representation as an African artist on the international stage. So without further ado, Sampa the Great, welcome.
Hello.
Thank you so much for coming on. I've been a fan of your music, and I'm so excited to have you on. I think your music is super important for so many reasons. And I kind of wanted to really ask, I have a lot of questions, but specifically, I know that you started writing, of course, when you were in the States and you were here studying. And I know that, you then kind of went to Australia, and I feel like all of these experiences really kind of informed your music and influenced the style. And I feel like your style is not just kind of representative of one location on the continent, that it's so very Pan-African. And that when I watch the videos, there are all of these different elements I'm picking up from different parts of the continent. So can you kind of talk a little bit about how your experiences influence your music and kind of these Pan-African elements that we see in the music, but also here in the lyrics?
Yeah, for sure. I didn't actually start writing in the States. That's the one place I actually didn't write through my journey. So born in Zambia, raised between Zambia and Botswana. So at age 1, my family moved to Botswana. And we kind of moved between the two places. We'd go back to see extended family or go back for holidays or this, that, and the third. So I kind of felt like I was not part of one country. So if it was in Zambia, I hadn't stayed there long enough to be called a Zambian. But in Botswana, I'm not a Botswana. So there was this identity crisis that started up at a really young age. And I noticed that I felt like I didn't belong anywhere. And I think that subconsciously came through music and not just fixing myself in one way to express, but in many ways to express. And then I was introduced to hip hop. I was introduced to rap, I think, at age 9. My cousin played Tupac Changes for the first time. And I went to his room and he was playing it on a cassette tape. And I was like, why did I come up here anyway to this room? Because I totally forgot why I even came to the room in the first place. And from then on, I was like, whatever this art form is, whatever this form of expression is, I want to express myself this way, because it made me sit down and think of the emotion that came through. I didn't even hear the lyrics when I first heard that. I was just like, the way he's put together his words, the way he's expressing himself. And I feel like at a young age, I really struggled to express myself because I was a middle kid. So I felt like I was not heard. It's either the older person is getting heard or the younger ones were getting heard. But as a middle kid, it was like, okay, people will choose to focus on me when there's time to focus on me. But I feel like with that song, he was able to express his feelings and his emotions so articulate that I was like, I wish I could do that. I wish I could express the way I feel without being flustered or without stuttering. And that was kind of how I fell in love with hip hop. And then I listened to the song the second time and I was like, yo, what he's talking about is really deep. So that was my first introduction to hip hop, was Tupac's Changes. And from then on, it was just, what is this art form? And I remember getting myself a diary and just writing, jotting down everything I felt, feeling like I'm not heard, just putting everything in diary form and slowly using that as a way to express myself. More so with slam poetry than rap. So it was poetry first, with slam poetry first, everything to do with poetry, because that was my world. I wasn't really in rap yet because it was really cool, but I didn't see anything that allowed me to say I could do this until I saw Lauryn Hill. When I first saw Lauryn Hill, I was like, okay, I can do this. Because there's a girl doing this and she's doing it better than the guys. So this is my pathway. She said, yes, you can do it. And this is what I'm going to do. And from then I started rapping. So I started rapping in high school. One of the only few girls who did do any rapping in high school. And from there, it became a huge, this is how you do hip hop. This is how you flaunt. This is how you do this and that. And it slowly started to, I slowly started to see that I wasn't quite what I thought hip hop was at the time. I didn't want to do the ego raps anymore. I didn't want to flaunt. I didn't want to be in the cyphers talking about how much I'm better than you or this. Like that slowly became less of a thing. And it was more so about expressing why I felt lonely at this age or why I felt fear or love. And it really wasn't aligning with what I was seeing in hip hop. I mean, obviously, Lauryn was expressing that way, but I could see already at a young age that that was not really where I was fitting in. And then I went to uni in the States. I went to Academy of the Art University when I first left Africa as a whole, and everything I thought the world was literally just the illusion broke down in front of my face. I went to San Francisco with my friend who wanted to be a director. I wanted to be a director too. Everything to do with the arts kind of here at home is slowly changing now, but was not seen as a career form. So you couldn't say I want to be an artist or I want to be a director. That was not a thing. So my friend Judith was like, let's go to America. You know, there's Hollywood and there's films and everything that glitters is gold over there. And I was just like, oh, okay, cool. There was no real direction. After high school, I was just like, okay, I'm done. Let me breathe a little. But for her, it was like, let's go see the world. And I kind of just followed her into this world. And what I was greeted with was one of the biggest wake-up calls in my life that really birthed who I am now. You know, I saw the way the world saw me as an African. I saw the way the world saw me as a Black person. And that encounter happened not in Africa, it happened in America. And the racism that I experienced there was just so vile that I was like, I'm going to leave this country And if I ever come back, I'm coming back as me. I'm coming back as Sampa fully, because there were experiences there that I was like, there's no way you can live under these conditions and just be a whole human being. Like, this is not healthy mentally. And to date, that's been the only place that I don't think I've fully created. I literally stopped writing. There's no song that I can remember from that time. I never wrote anything. And I think what I was just going through was a metamorphosis, really transforming from the young kid who didn't really know who she was to the Sampa you see today. And most of the influences of what you hear in the music were awakened then, to see how the world sees me. And I'm like, okay, cool. Then who am I? And everything to do with who I thought I was, down to the, you're actually not Zambian, or you're actually not from Botswana, so where are you from? And everything that, I kind of look through in the recent albums, The Return, all those ideas were kind of birthed there. And then from the States, I decided to come home because I was like, yeah, that's intense. That's a lot. And my older sister was like, I want to finish my degree, so I want to go to Australia. And it came out of the blue because no one in my family has ever gone there before. It was like she just pointed it out in a map and she was like, yeah, this is what I'm going to do. And I think at that time, I really didn't have a plan with my life. I mean, like the time before. But even more so, then it was just like, I'm not going anywhere where I feel like I'm not wanted. I'm not going anywhere where I have to just struggle to be a person. And my sister was like, my older sister, Janana, was like, oh, okay, so are you saying you're allowing people to tell you where to go or where to not go in this world? Because that's what you're telling me. And I had no rebuttal to it. I thought I was speaking in power, where I'm going to stay home. I'm going to stay in a place that I know I'm wanted. But in doing that, I also kind of cut off myself from going anywhere else or seeing any other things, And she kind of pushed that idea for me to come to Australia with her. And I did. My only intention was to do my degree and get out. That was it. Because sadly, a degree from overseas is seen as something that is bigger and more, if you're back in Africa and you have a degree from the States, that's seen as bigger. So that was my option, the route that I took. I was going to go get my degree and come back and just work at home. And got to Australia. The different, not really. I guess that's something to, delve into more later. But I guess the difference with racism in Australia is that it's very covert. It's very psychological, because it's one of those, I'm not being racist, but you are being racist. And it makes you go through a mental roller coaster to the point where you think you're crazy. And I'd rather see the racism for what it is, so I know how to deal with it, than not. But I went to Australia. I wanted to do my degree. And obviously, I can't stop expressing, even though I did majorly when I was in the States. And I just started writing when I was in Australia. I started writing. And I was doing an audio engineering degree, so I couldn't really escape seeing music being played. At that time, I was like, okay, everybody wants to be a rapper. Everyone wants to be an artist. Let me be an engineer, and that way I can make my parents happy and maybe, get this old job, even though I don't really like it. And so I started doing engineering and started recording people. And I was like, I literally can do better than you. I can't sit here and not express. I need to do something with this. And I decided to do the Great Mixtape at that time. I was still in school. I was still waitressing on the side. And then the Great Mixtape came out and it just, I guess, exploded in Australia. I guess people hadn't heard anything like it. And it just started pushing. And at that point, I was like, okay, First off, I need to explain to my parents that this school project is actually music that's growing and gaining attention. And I had to solidify that conversation with them that I was going to be an artist. But more so, I had to make that decision to stay in Australia and be based there because the industry was bigger. So I had to forgo that first plan of doing my degree and coming back home where I felt safe and comfortable, where I know people want me there, and stay in a country that I knew I was going to struggle with, but knowing that I would grow my career. And with that came everything that I experienced in Australia, which again is poured out in my music. So that whole journey from leaving home and thinking, you know, you're going to hit the big lights, you're going to make it, and just your world to come crumbling down to a point where you don't express anymore, and really looking into who you are, not just as an African, but as a person, and diving into the way I express, because also hip hop is a culture from another country. And so why do I gravitate towards that genre, you know, instead of the genres at home? And that's sort of how my journey has met me where I am, and why I express the way I do. Yeah.
Wow. I remember talking to you before regarding that kind of some of the things that surprised you about being in the States. And I know you talked a bit about your interactions with African Americans in this country. Can you kind of talk about a little bit about that and some of the things that I guess that you experienced? But I mean, obviously, if you listen to your music, you have definitely interwoven that, you know, because I think I was listening to, oh gosh, it was Time's Up. I can't remember the song where it was the soul music. It was, I mean, there are definitely throughout your songs, you hear that, the African American, you know, music. Sure. So you have these experiences, but still kind of have this very Pan-African. So can you talk a bit about some of that?
My experiences. I think one thing that a lot of international students do before they leave home is look up their university, but look up how many Black people are there. And as funny as it is, sometimes it's actually very sad because you're just looking for a place that you know at least you'll be safe, or at least there are people who look like you there. And I think that was one of the comforts I gave myself before I came to uni in the States. And when I did get there, I had no idea of the dichotomy between African Americans and Africans. So for me, it was like, okay, cool. Someone who looks like me, cool. And it was just like not even clicking. And I literally had to stand back and look at history and why things are the way they are. Because here at home, especially in high school, our GEDs are British. So the British still have a really strong hold on our educational system. So once you graduate, the last exam you take is actually sent to the British, and they mark it up and they send it back. And it's just like, is that not still colonialism, but through education? And so with that, what you're learning of your history is through the perspective and eyes of somebody else. And if anything, most of our history as Zambians is oral. So you're not hearing history the way you would hear it through maybe West Africans a lens, or through an African-American lens. And so that was literally my first introduction to how, you know, the transatlantic slave trade has affected each of us on either side. And I was not really attuned to what that would feel like on the American end. And so when I came there was just that ignorance on my side. And for me, it was just straight up, someone who looks like me, finished. No in-between story, no struggle, no idea of what it would take to create a whole nother culture for yourself, because that was taken away from you. For me, it was straight up, you look like me, it's done, it's finished. So one of the experiences I had, I was going to the cafeteria, and I'm quite introverted, I would say, if I'm in a new place. I'd say I'm an intro kind of extro. If I'm comfortable, I'll laugh, I'll talk, I'll joke. But if it's a new place, I try to get really comfortable before I choose to express myself, especially when it's a whole nother country, whole nother culture. And I remember going into the cafeteria, and there were a bunch of basketball players, African Americans, and they were, they saw me coming in, walked in. One of them was in my class. I didn't really talk a lot in my class as well. And I remember sitting down, not really talking to anyone, not really engaging with anyone. And I guess that was seen as rude or whatever they took it. And I just remember one of the guys shouting out, "Go back to Africa." And this is like in a room of a couple of people. So, and I'm mostly non-Black people. And I'm just like sitting there, and I'm like, I know this guy is not talking to me, but I am the only African in this room. So why would you say that? Mm. And experiences like that, or experiences where you feel othered, to me were really strange. Because at home, even if you're not a Zambian or if you're not a Botswana, if you're in a room full of non-Black people and you see another Black person, it's just like, got you, cool, we in this room. Chill. I don't speak the same language as you. I'm not from the same, tribe as you, but we got that link. Cool. And I feel like for the first time, I knew that connection was not there. And it was really hard for me to take. It was one of the things that hit me hard because I feel like it was one of my safety nets going there as an international student. It's like, okay, cool. Even if I'm new, at least if these people look like me or people I know, then I'm chill. And that was just kind of, and that was one of the experiences, just really feeling othered in my classes to the point where I just let my music or my work speak for me. And I think that kind of developed to where I am now. It's like, okay, you don't like me or you don't know me. Cool. I'll just let my work speak for me. And I'll do it really well that you have to say something because it's really good. So that's kind of how that othering happened for me when I was there. And I sort of got an insight or a glimpse into that relationship. Yeah.
And then I guess lastly for me before, I know other folks have questions. In terms of Australia, I know with the award situation. So from what I was reading, 2019 was when they started with the hip hop category at the ARIA Awards. And you won, but they didn't air the acceptance. Yeah. And so the following year, you won again, and you won 3 different categories. Yeah. And, you use the opportunity to, really speak to the lack of diversity, but also, just basically to racism in general. And you also kind of, acknowledged the struggle of other Black women in the industry. So could you kind of, I guess, talk about that experience being especially a Black woman artist in Australia?
Yeah. Australia, the Australian music industry is really in its kindergarten form when it comes to diversity. Any efforts of late have been, you see what we've done? Like, clap for us. We've moved, and nothing really of substance of changing a whole blueprint of a system. In 2019, there was an urban category. So urban category, if I could just give you perspective, is R&B, is hip hop, is every Black category put into one. And you have to kind of pick and choose one that did well in that year. Obviously, they're racist. So they decided to break the category down into best hip hop release and I believe best R&B to kind of give a bit of room for Black people to not, express themselves the same. And that was the first time it was done that way, which is a huge deal because it's like, oh, wait, there's a step of diversity happening. This may actually be a huge change. So myself and an artist called Kayit, who is also a woman of color, won that year. And for me, it was the first, I think, hip hop award of a Black person since, is it 2015? If Carl's on this call, jail me out. But basically, there've been a lot of white rappers who've won that award, the best hip hop release. And I don't think they had been either a Black person or Black woman to break that until I won the award. And so that win was greeted with myself and Kayit both put in an ad during the winning. I wasn't there, but Kayit was actually there, and she was not. Her acceptance speech was not shown on the regularly scheduled program. It was put on the ad break. And so obviously a huge deal. This first step of diversity was just clouded and put on an ad break, and we were grouped together, like the two Black people just grouped together in the ad break. And just goes to show that, with the Australian music industry, it's more about looking like you're changing than actually changing. Mm. And so this year happened, and I was nominated for some awards for the return. My first response was, yeah, no, you can keep that because you're not actually changing. And then it became more than just myself. It became more of what I felt, because I knew that had I performed, it would be something that you wouldn't necessarily see on Australian TV. And it was more so on a legacy route that I chose to actually just do the performance, but do it as me. And so we did the performance. I did it in Botswana. It was live streamed. And I really said what I wanted to say without any filter in the introduction of my performance. And we really actually fought hard to keep that intro in there. And the intro wasn't really saying anything controversial. It was just, are you actually really changing? Which is the truth, because you didn't really show, that your full stride was actually a stride. And we went back and forth in trying to get that intro just in the performance. Ended up winning some awards, but still went through a huge struggle just to get my performance in. And just different things have come to light that just kind of show that nothing has really changed, and everything was still for show, and everything's kind of just hopping on the trend of the Black squares, but not really moving anywhere. And so, yeah, my relationship with the Australian music industry has been really hard, especially being a person who wasn't raised in Australia. It's like, who is this immigrant coming from Africa to tell us how to rap or to tell us how to do our industry? Yeah. And I knew it wasn't going to be greeted with open arms, but I'm quite happy we went the opposite route, even though it came with its scars, even though it came with its challenges. It just created a gateway where, other Black women or other Black artists can create or do something different. But it's been a challenge, especially in a country where not a lot of things are Black owned. So the fear is, if I speak out, I'm not going to go to this festival, meaning I won't be able to earn a living. I won't be able to pay my rent. So it's not that I can't speak out. It's if I do these, this is what's going to happen. And so we've slowly built, the guts to be like, no, this is wrong regardless of if you pay me or not. It's just not right. And it shouldn't be something that continuously happens. It's been a journey. It's still a struggle. Sometimes Australia takes 3 steps forward and then 2 back, and you're like, okay, we literally just talked about this. But I'm still glad that I've done what I've done in that industry, and I think it's made an impact. But it's still been a struggle within itself. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, Dennis, my hand over.
Sure. So if any of you all out there in Dr. Clark's class, if you have questions, now's the time to post them or raise your hand. I guess I'll ask a question in the meantime, and we'll stick on the topic of your time in Australia. But I'm curious about, if you're building a career in Australia, what does that do when you go to Botswana? How does your celebrity, what does it look like when you come home, essentially?
Yeah. Well, Botswana, for one, does not really care, which is actually a blessing. My mom is on I'm supporting Lauryn Hill, and she's like, oh, cool, that's good. Have you washed the dishes? So it's kind of like, okay, cool, you're doing what you love, but let's keep you here on the ground. So it hasn't been hectic. Zambia has responded because I am Zambian, and they respond with pride because our industry is still growing there. So to see another Zambian be able to take these strides, for them, they've been really proud. But for me, the plan was always initially to learn what I need to learn in Australia or wherever else and bring that home. And it's still the plan. It's just, I feel like the final goal was fast-tracked during the pandemic. So I had to come back home. Shows were canceled during the pandemic. And we ended up doing our first live streams in Zambia and in Botswana. And they turned out much better than anything I think I've done in Australia, which showed a lot of people that we do have the equipment to do what we do that side. We have the people, the talent. It's just we don't have the opportunity. So in coming back home, we've been able to create these things that we do create that side. But, I'll be based in both areas, but I think the goal is still the same, to learn what I learned from one side and help build the other side, if that answers the question.
It does. We've got a few folks raising hands. Lauren, I saw your hand first. I'll let you go.
Hi. It's really nice to meet you. Good, and you? Okay, so I believe you said that leaving Zambia and Botswana, you kind of started to realize how you are viewed as an African woman in the world. I was wondering, how that image of maybe what other people think of you influences the way that you portray yourself, whether it is in the style of clothes and prints you wear, or how you do your hair. So
positively, definitely in the clothes I wear. The way my hair, for one, was kind of a huge thing in Australia. The whole Afro or braid art was a huge thing. And it's definitely from home. The tribes at home do this all the time. So for me, it was like that I see as beautiful. So I'm going to do that. And it was seen as amazing. Negatively, I feel like there's still, bits of culture that didn't grow with us, particularly to do with femininity. So the things which will be seen as not, what's the word? We're a bit strict when it comes to empowerment and what is seen as traditional. And those are some of the things that I've kind of okay, I can't reflect that in my music because that makes me step back from who I am. So kind of the positive and negative of how I express.
Thank you for your question, Lauren. Next up, we have Kaylee.
Hi, how are you doing?
Hi, Kaylee.
Hi. So I just wanted to say I've been able to use some of your music as some of my assignments for this semester, and I've become a lifelong fan. It's just been amazing. And so I just wanted to know specifically, with your music videos, they all seem to have this common theme of very bright, vibrant and bright colors and stuff like that. So I just wanted to know if there was anything in your journey as a musician that specifically inspires that, or if that's just you and your personal preference and that kind of thing.
It's a bit of both. I feel like I've grown up around a lot of things you see in the visuals. With Final Form, the nyaos are part of our culture, so we put that in there. Braiding is part of our culture. A lot of African print is very bright, very loud, so that's part of the visuals as well. And then down to things like energy, where there's incense, or, we're all moving in unison. Those are really personal stuff that may be seen as weird. But for me, it's just like, that's how I envision, people connecting to music as one. Or meditating is kind of a way I bring myself to peace. So it's a bit of my personal and the stuff that I've grown up around, being raised here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kaylin. Okay. Winnie.
Hi, thanks so much for coming in today. I've also been writing quite a bit about Zambian music this semester. And I noticed that in a lot of your songs, there is a contrast between tradition and modernism, in that like you'll have a lot of like African dances, but you also have Western clothes. That very interesting contrast. So I wonder if you could talk more about that.
Yeah, it's always been, like I said, there's certain parts of our culture, our tradition that I feel, especially to do with womanhood, haven't moved along with us. So I'll definitely get bits from that inspire me from my culture and my tradition, but I'll relate that to who I am now as a person, or who I am now as a woman. So I feel like it's a really good bridge, to take the knowledge of the old, or take the knowledge of the origin, but relate it to who we are now and better us now. So it's always been a thing to have both of those elements meet in my work.
We have a question in the chat. This one is from Riley. The question is, could you talk briefly about the creative process behind the Final Form music video?
That I didn't even think was going to happen, honestly. It was the first album. I knew that I wanted a video at home. I'd never done a video at home. I didn't know how we were going to do that. We set course with Sanjay De Silva, who's my friend and the director of that video, and Tombi Moyo, who's basically styled most, if not all, of my music videos. Boz and Carl Perez, who's my manager, but also the producer of that video. And the idea was to show the elements of my culture, to show the elements of my home. Being based in Australia, that was kind of taken away from me with the whole Australian rapper thing. So it was constantly reiterated that I was an Australian rapper, and I felt like they were removing bits of my story, which was Zambian. So for that video, literally, we wanted to come back home and just show bits of Zambia, bits of my culture. But a creative process, as in maybe breaking down what we wore or breaking down where we shot, it was definitely places that, to me, make up what I know as Zambia, or styles that make up what I know as Zambia. So it was heavy on just the symbolism of the country that I'm from. So the music came first, sent that to Sanjay. We sat down together and discussed what the album means to me and what this song means to me, and what I see when I listen to the song, which is what I mostly discuss with directors. Are the images I see when I listen to this song? Can I break down, a visual that I feel relates to this song and why it relates to this song? And I kind of just give all that information so that the director is the vessel in translating that to the visual world. So we work hand in hand that way.
Gotta love the creative process. I'm always envious of artists. I think of myself as a failed artist. I wasn't brave enough to be an artist. So thank you for sharing that. Ariana, you're up.
Hi, just want to start off by saying it's so cool that you're here, and I'm so grateful that we got to hear you speak. My question is, I know that there's a lot of resentment in the diaspora where people who didn't migrate abroad sort of resent people who did and found success like you.
Mm-hmm.
So have you faced any, I don't know, backlash, like when you go home to do music videos where people are like, oh, you're privileged? Like, have you gotten any critiques like that? And how have you fought those back, I guess?
Right. From all ends, even in Australia, I have gotten critique like that. With Zambia, more so, you don't deserve to be in this industry. You didn't start out from this industry, so you can't be a part of this industry. And since you're privileged in Australia there, you can go be over there. But for me, I was a Zambian musician before anything happened. Before I was known as Sampa the Great. I was a Zambian living in Botswana, writing music in Botswana. And no one can take that away from me. I know where my legacy is from. I know where I'm from. So the technical aspects of me just starting my music career in Australia is the difference between, being a Zambian artist who started here and being a Zambian artist who started there. It definitely comes with its privilege, and I've been fortunate enough, and I'm using that privilege in order to make a better industry in Zambia. So you can't really change, people's mind frames of what they think is fair or not. But I feel with what I'm doing with my music, I know how to make sure I'm not the only Zambian who's doing what I'm doing. So I feel like that is my balance for that.
Thank you. Your confidence is inspiring.
Thank you. That's a really good question.
We have another question from Ebanalua.
Hi. So a lot of what you said in terms of like living between many different cultures and then your experiences in the US resonated a lot with me, and I'm sure a lot of other people here. And I was just wondering, like, how you go about writing your music to really like portray that, because portray it so well, and I just wonder what your writing process is like.
Oh, thank you. I think it depends on the mind state I'm in. Currently between Botswana and Zambia. So the more I'm in Zambia, the more I'm, speaking with my people in our language, or the more I'm being influenced by things from home. So any recent music that's been released, I'm speaking in Nyanja and Bemba. I didn't do that when I was in Australia. So I try not to overwhelm myself with all the different aspects of different places I've been, but I try to express with the current mind state I'm in, or the place that I'm in. And I feel like those different elements will seep through without being overwhelming, if that makes sense.
Thank you for that. There aren't any other questions coming in. I know that when we were offline, before we got started, you and Dr. Clark were talking about I guess, indigenous folks in Australia engaged in hip hop culture. Can you talk a little bit about what that's like, especially, you coming as, essentially an outsider working in hip hop in Australia, and there's already that sort of racial animosity among artists on the continent. How do you fit into that? And what is the indigenous presence in hip hop in Australia?
Yeah, you definitely have to know when to lend your voice and when to amplify. Obviously, you're coming into a place that is hostile for the original people of that place. And with both of us being Black, it's always a thing of making sure that you are standing up for the First Nations of the country, because you are getting privileges that they cannot afford to get. And so there are times when I have the platform and power to amplify their voices, and times when I have to step back because it's not my place to speak, and it's not my story to tell. And I've just made that very apparent with my music or the way I engage with my community. you definitely have to have a point where all these community meet. It's not just the African community or, the Indian community or the Asian community and the indigenous community. We all meet at a point where we're like, this country's messed up for all of us. We understand that, but these are the people who speak first. After they're done, we amplify their voices and then we tell the story that we need to tell. There is presence, a hip hop presence of First Nations in Australia. Like I said, mainstream will always only show what it wants to show. So you may not see a lot of that there, but it's coming up a whole lot more now. There's a lot of Black presence, there's a lot of First Nations presence, and that's just going to continue to grow.
Can you speak a little bit in terms of women in hip hop, specifically Black women in hip hop in Australia? I know that there aren't a lot of Black women in hip hop in Australia, but can you kind of speak a little bit to that? And then also, what are some of the social issues that artists are speaking to? So like I know here, Black Lives Matter and the movement for Black Lives, or it's something that a lot of artists are speaking to. And I remember in Australia, you guys had that the African gangs thing that was a few years ago. That so there have been these moments where that have made news. So what are some of the issues that a lot of the artists there are kind of addressing?
Let me.
No, that was it.
Oh, okay. Let me speak on the African gangs issue first. So a lot of our South Sudanese family had a huge wave of racism happen in Australia where they were villainized and so on. And I remember I had a show at a place called the Nightcat, and there I was expressing BB9, a project that I did, and talking about home and so on. And it was a 3-day show. And after that, the owner said some comments that were very racist. He basically said there was a venue where a fight broke out, and they just happened to be 2 South Sudanese kids who were in a fight. And this owner of the venue that I had played at was like, yeah, this is why I'm very particular about having Africans in my venue. And his venue actually has a lot of Black artists come through and make money for him and make money for the venue. And so obviously a lot of us were, quite upset. And I took it a bit further and I was like, you know what? I'm never playing in that venue ever again. I don't care if you pay anyone else. Like, I'm not doing that. And like I said, it's really hard when, you have something to lose or you earn a living from not speaking so much on things because you don't want to ruffle a lot of feathers. So one of the huge things at that time was Africans speaking on the whole African gangs thing, or Black people speaking on not being paid enough at festivals or not being in festival slots. Women of color not even being in 2 out of 10. That's been a huge issue as well. So those are some of the things we speak about right now. It's on equity and owning things. I think there was a huge wave of, it's Black Lives Matter time. Let's get some Black people on our labels. Let's do this and that. And it was all for show. And none of the artists are really reaping from that time. And so for us now as Black artists, we're talking about ownership. It's like, okay, if you won't make the label, we'll make our own label. And with Australia, the usual response to that is, oh, you're being racist because you don't want us in your space. And it's just like, you don't have a space for us, actually. So we're trying to create our own space. And that's kind of the conversation of late that's been happening, is ownership, Black-owned magazines where we can see ourselves, TV where we can, a whole day and you don't see one Black person. You live in the very country that you see Black people every day in your own community and your own circle. So, yeah, ownership, which is a very scary talk to people who've been privileged to just constantly see everything with a white lens. but it's the talk we're having because everything else is just like on a loop. We can't keep talking about this. So that's where we are now. Kind of put a lot of things together.
Well, I do want to say, I remember in Final Form, actually, that's a video we analyzed in a couple of classes, not just a hip hop class, but we were talking about it in my other Intro to Contemporary Africa class yesterday, and just wanting them to look at all the different symbolisms and the sounds. And the one thing that we picked up on is there's a moment where in the video you do like this, and I'm like, every Black woman knows what this is. And it was just like very, one simple gesture that it's just like any Black woman who's ever braids or a weave or whatever knows what that means. And so I just, appreciate, your music and kind of, definitely what you're doing. And I'm really looking forward to what you are producing next. And so on that, I want to kind of find out what's kind of next for you. What are you working on?
Yeah. So I'm working on an album. This is the first album that has been produced at home, which is a big deal because for me, it sounds whole. Everything else has been in a different place, and what I'm feeling there, I don't feel like I'm home yet. I feel like, that's what's been the topic of the project. But now when you're home and you feel whole in yourself, you allow yourself to talk about, other things. And I feel like this is going to be a really important, freeing project because it was done solely at home. And with different sounds, it's more experimental now. I've always been a person who really hated just being in one genre. Like, bring all the different inspirations because they all make you feel different things and put that in one song or one project. But I've always tried to pick different, be very eclectic with the music that I choose. So project, first time a whole project's been made at home, made it in Zambia. It's really special. And hopefully the end of this year, we release that into the world.
Okay, nice. And I'm assuming once we kind of get past the COVID, you're going to be back on the road.
Touring and so on. Yeah. November, fingers crossed that we're doing shows in Australia, maybe in the States early next year. And obviously back home as well. But we'll see how things go, especially around the July, August period, so we can make a call. If not, I didn't really want that to stop me from making an album. I knew it was a huge issue. What are you going to do when the whole project is produced? But I need to express myself. So making the project, and then from there, we'll go with planning how we're going to bring it to the world.
We will definitely keep an eye out for that because put
DC on your tour date.
Yes, you have to come to DC.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. All right, Dennis, did you have anything else?
No, just thank you for sharing your time and letting us have a peek into what the creative process is like, and even just the sort of thought process that goes into creating the work that you do. So really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time out. Thank you for staying through the whole power cut situation.
No,
it's been a pleasure.
Great.
We the my life jam nation. You realize all the time we wasting. You realize all the pain we facing. Please pour a cup feminine libation. My gosh, we raising. Please sympathize all the lies we raising. Please realize all the time. Family energy, drank a couple quarters on my chorus, then I code up. If I rule the world, money stacks for all my daughters. Never ask for payment in the womb times 9. Now we see the blood on the street times trying. Feminine energy, balance up the indestructible in the vaginal heaven.